Lesson 6 focuses on operations with decimals. So first, we're going to focus on adding and subtracting decimals. Adding and subtracting, you're going to follow the same rule. So the rule for adding and subtracting, you basically just treat it as a normal whole number. The only difference is you just have to keep the decimals lined up so that you carry the decimal as you work. So let me show you some examples of these. So our first example, we're going to subtract. So subtract 39.812 minus 14.236. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by lining these up vertically. So we're going to have 39 and 812 thousandths minus 14.236 thousandths. Notice how I lined up the decimal places, and that's always a process you're going to want to do, is line up the decimal places. And now you're just going to work vertically. So 2 minus 6, I need to take away from this position, so I carry. So I get 6, need to borrow. So we have 7 here. This becomes 10. 10 minus 3 gives me 7. 7 minus 2 gives me 5. Carrying that decimal place. 9 minus 4 gives me 5. And then 3 minus 1 gives me 2. So then your answer is 25 and 576 thousandths. Let's look at another example. So for this example, we're going to add 8 plus 0.002 plus 3.1 plus 0.04. So for this example, we need to make sure we line up all of the pieces. So again, we're going to have 8. Then I have 0.002. So you have to think of this 8 as a decimal point right after it, since it's a whole number. So that means the 0.002 is going to go like that. 3.1. And then I have 0.04. So again, you're working vertically. So you can put like filler zeros in there if it helps. So really this 8 has like 3 zeros at the end, or as many zeros as you want. But I'm just going to write it with 3 since the number with the most decimal places has 3 decimal places. So I'm just going to make sure that all of these have 3 decimal places. So I'm just filling in the zeros. So now it's just adding vertically. So I have 0 plus 2 plus 0 plus 0, we get 2. Zeros all the way down plus 4, we get 4. We get 1. We add, keep that decimal place, and then 8 plus 3 gives me 11. So your answer for this is 11 and 142 thousandths. Okay, so that's it for that. And then let's look at one more subtraction problem. So if I want to do 5.9 minus 3.0814, first thing you want to do is line these up vertically. So I have 5.9, and then I have 3.0814. So again, you want to line up your decimals vertically, and I'm going to want to add in those extra zeros. Especially for a subtraction problem, you want to be able to add in those zeros so that it's more helpful to see when you have to borrow. So what I'm going to do when I go to subtract, this is actually going to become 899, and then the 1's going to go over here. So I have 10 minus 4 becomes 6. 9 minus 1, 8. 9 minus 8 is 1. 8 minus 0 is 8. And then I have 5 minus 3 gives me 2. So my answer, 2 and 8,186 10,000ths. So that's it for adding and subtracting. Now we're going to move on to multiplication. So multiplication kind of follows the same process a little bit, where you're just going to multiply as normal, and then you just have to remember at the end to take care of your decimal places. So for multiplication, you don't have to worry about lining up your numbers vertically. You just go ahead and multiply as they are, and then however many decimal places total you had in all of the original numbers, you have to make sure that your answer has the same number of decimals as a combination of all of those. So let's look at some examples to show you exactly what I mean. So for the first example, we'll do 0.5 times 0.3. So basically, you just multiply these as normal. So 3 times 5 gives me 15, so you would carry the 1. 3 times 0 gives me 0, add the 1, so you get 15. And then you could move on and do this 0 times 5, 0 times 0, but there's really not a point to it, so we're just going to leave it. But the most important part here, so far we have 15, but the most important part is the decimals. So I have 1 decimal place here and 1 decimal place here, which means that for my answer, instead of 15, I actually have to make sure that I have 2 decimal places. So it's really going to be 0.15 hundredths. So 0 and 15 hundredths is the answer. Let's look at another one. So I have 3.05 times 4.36. So for this one, again, multiplication is normal. So we start with the 6 and the 5. So 6 times 5 gives me 30. Carry the 3. 6 times 0 is 0, plus the 3 gives me 3. 6 times 3 gives me 18. So now I've taken care of the hundredths position, or I've taken care of that 6. So now I move over, and I have to move over 1 space to the left. So I'm just going to put an X there to kind of hold that space. And now I'm going to start with the 3 and multiply it by each of the numbers. So 3 times, I'm also going to get rid of this too. So now we're going to do the next row. So we have 3 times 5, I get 15. Carry the 1. 3 times 0 is 0, plus 1. And then 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, so now I keep moving here. So now I have to move over 2 places. So now I'm looking at the 4. So 4 times 5 is going to give me 20. Carry the 2. 4 times 0 is 0, plus 2. And then 4 times 3 gives me the 12. And then for all of these numbers that we got out from multiplying, I now need to add. So I'm going to add 0, and these x's are kind of like zeros. Some people put zeros there if you want. They're basically just placeholders. So I get 0. I get 8 when I add. 8 plus 1 gives me 9. 9 plus 1 gives me 10. Plus 2 gives me 12. Carry that 1. So I have 2 plus 1 gave me 3. 1 plus nothing gives me 1. So now I have this whole long number, and I have these decimal places here. So I have 4 decimal places total when you look at your 2 original numbers that you started with. So that means my answer needs to have 4 decimal places as well. So my decimal, so I need to count 1, 2, 3, 4. So my decimal is going to go right in here in my final answer. So your final answer is going to be 13 and 2,980 10,000ths. Okay, so that's multiplication. And then the last operation that we need to cover is division. So division, you're going to kind of basically treat it the same as normal division. Again, you do need to worry about the decimal place. So for division, if the divisor is a decimal, you're going to change it to a whole number by moving the decimal point to the right as many places as necessary. Then you're going to move the decimal point in the dividend the same number of places. So that's only if we're dividing by a decimal. If we are taking a number and dividing by a whole number, we're just going to place the decimal point directly above it in the dividend. Then we're going to just divide using the same process as normal. So the only extra step we need to worry about is if we're dividing by a decimal, then we have to move that decimal place over first. So let's look at some different examples to kind of show you what this looks like. So for the first one, we'll just divide by a whole number to just show you. So we're going to do 34.8, and we're going to divide that by 4. So we have 34.8, and then the 4 is going to go on the outside over here. So basically the only difference that's going to be between dividing by decimals for this and whole numbers is that we're going to have a decimal in our answer, and it's just going to go directly above where it is in the dividend. So now what we're going to do is just look, how many times does 4 go into 3? Well, it doesn't. So now I need to look at, well, how many times does 4 go into 34? Well, it's going to go into 34 8 times, because 4 times 8 is 32. So you're going to subtract the difference. So we have 2. Carry down the next term, we have 8. So then you ask yourself, how many times does 4 go into 28? Well, 7 times. Multiply the 4 and the 7, we get 28. Subtract, we get a remainder of 0. So that means our answer is just going to be 8 and 7 times. Now remember, you could check your answer by doing 8.7 times 4, and you should get out 34.8. Okay, so that's always a good way to check. Let's look at another one. So we're going to do 1,138.9 divided by 35. So the setup's going to look like this. We're going to have 1,138.9, and then the 35 is what we're dividing by. So again, that decimal point comes right up right from the beginning, so you don't have to worry about it. And then you're just looking, how many times does 35 go into 1? It doesn't. It doesn't go into 11. So you got to look at it as 35 going into 113. It's going to go in 3 times. So then we're multiplying. 3 times 35 is going to give me 105. Subtract off. So 113 minus 105 is going to give me 8. We're going to carry down the other 8. Now I'm looking at 35 going into 88. Well, that's only going to happen twice. 2 times 35 is going to give me 70. So we're going to have a 18 left over here. Carry down the next term. How many times does 35 go into 189? So 35 goes into 189 5 times. So 5 times 35 is going to be 175. Subtract 189 minus 175. So we have 4 and 1. So we have 14 left over. So right now it looks like we have a remainder of 14. But what we can do is we can keep going and see if we're going to eventually be able to get this to work out with decimal places. So you can always do this where you can add an additional 0. I could add as many zeros as I want and keep going. So I'm just going to add a 0 at the end there, and that allows me to carry down a 0. So now I can say, well, 35, how many times does it go into 140? And it actually goes in an even amount of times. And you wouldn't know that off the top of your head, but like if we kind of like guess and check. Like all these numbers, the 3, 2, 5, and 4 up top here, those I'm kind of, guessing and checking to figure out how many times does 35 go into each of these numbers down at the bottom. So 4 times 35 actually works out nice, where I'm going to get 140. So then you get a remainder of 0, so that means I'm going to stop there, and then my answer is going to be 32 and 54 hundredths. Okay? And now I want to show you another example where we're dividing by a decimal to show you kind of what we do in a situation like that. So we're going to do 31.35 divided by 3.8. So before you can do anything, your first goal here is to get whatever you're dividing by, it needs to be a whole number. So I have to move this one place to the right to get it to be a whole number. So that means up here, this needs to move over one place to the right. So really my new problem becomes 313.5 divided by 38. And then it's just like the problem we had in the previous page where we did a decimal divided by a whole number. So the 38 is going to be what we're dividing by. And the 313 is the dividend. You're going to bring that decimal up, and then you're just going to go ahead and divide it. So 38 going into 313 is going to happen 8 times. So 8 times 38 is going to give me 304. Subtract these. So we're going to get 13 minus 4 gives me 9. Bring down the 5. And like I said, this is kind of trial and error. 38 times 95, but you kind of got to estimate. Can it go in 3 times? Well, not quite, because 3 times 30 would give me 90. So I am only going to be able to do it twice. So sometimes you might not get it on the first try. But you kind of just keep going with it. So 2 times 38 is going to give me 76. And then subtract. So we have 15 minus 6 gives me 9. 8 minus 7 gives me 1. Now I have a remainder of 19. Let's see if we can get it to work out. So if I add a 0 at the end, carry down a 0, does 38 go into 190? And the answer is yes, it goes into it 5 times. So 5 times 38 is going to give me 190, and now I'm going to be able to come out to a whole number. So my answer, or not to a whole number, but to a ending decimal. So my answer is going to be 8 and 25 hundredths. Let me show you one last example where your decimal doesn't come out, like by adding an additional 0. So I just want to show you what happens in that situation. So this is our last one. So we're going to have 17 divided by 0.03. So again, figure out how many places you have to move the decimal. Well, I have to move it twice to get a whole number. So that means here, the decimal is really 17, and the decimal is right after the 17. So that means I need to move that over. So what's going to happen is I'm really going to have 1700, because this was like 17.00. So I'm moving it over twice. And that's going to be divided by 3. So now I don't really have any decimals. Now I'm just dealing with whole numbers because I moved everything. So, show you what that looks like. Oops, let me move that down. So we have 1700. So 3 goes into 17 5 times. We get 15. Subtract, we get 2. Bring down the 0. 3 goes into 26 times. We get 18. Bring down the 2. We get 20 again. 6 times. Bring down, we get 2. And we have a remainder of 2, but remember we can add zeros. This time, since I don't have a decimal point, I have to add in that decimal point because otherwise you're changing the number. So now I can add zeros, so I can carry it down. You're going to put that decimal point up here, so I get 6 again. We get 18 minus 2. And you're going to see that, look at this pattern just keeps on going. You keep getting 2 every time, which is going to allow you to create 20, which is going to allow your 3 to go into it 6 times. So basically, the answer for this is going to be 566.666, and it's just going to keep repeating. So I could round it. So the rounded answer, let's just say to the nearest tenth, would be 566.7. Because I would round that 6 in the 100th spot would round the 6 in the 10th spot up. So we'll say that's our answer. Okay, so that's how you would treat a situation like that. When it doesn't come out, you just basically, you get to a point where eventually you just have to round your final answer. All right, so that's it for operations.